you guys that were here last week, Kelly, she gave me a little bit of a little insight because we did a video yesterday. She's going to give part 2 from last week's talk. She's going to carry last week's talk that was, I requested this, and that whole great teaching and that experience that Michael had. Well, Kelly's going to talk more on that as what we could maybe term as part 2. So that's going to be interesting and exciting. And I love that because she's going to come at it from a different place. And I think you could probably come at that statement from many different places. I requested this.
It's going to be a prequel.
It's going to be a prequel. Okay, so it's a prequel. And we have a guest from Florida, George MacArthur, that's going to do our thought for the day after our meet and greet and before we bring Kelly up. And before we get into that, I just want to make a few announcements. If you're not on our mailing list, you're probably not getting our new weekly newsletters that tells you who's going to be talking this morning. It has the latest blog. It has all the latest weekly information from the Teachers of God Foundation. So go to teachersofgod.org and sign up to be on the mailing list so you get that. If you sign up for the mailing list, you'll get that. If you sign up for the Friday group online open mic, that's another different mailing list. You need to do that separate. And that at the open mic is next Friday. So don't come here. But you guys that are live streaming, stay there and come back. And we're going to have 2 guest teachers. One is Myra Feldman. I think she's from somewhere in Europe. She's a great teacher. I think she is one that retranslated the 40-day into a different language. I think that's, and then we have Karen Tyndall. She's in our Living in Purpose Mastery group, and she is going to give a teaching next week. So we have 2 guest teachers for next week. And I'm looking forward to hearing both of them and seeing all of you, whoever's there. And we have Jackie Laura Jones is the presenter in the presenter series this month. She just has a new deliverable that went out on Monday. And we'll have an open mic gathering tomorrow morning, Saturday morning at 11 a.m. for any comments, any questions, any ahas, anything that you want to bring as a community in the presenter series. And we also, if you're on our mailing list, you're seeing that we have open mic gatherings for Living in Purpose on a weekly basis now, because the teachers that have been in Living in Purpose for a while, they're now turning around and they're sharing from their own expression. And so that's really cool. We've got teachers that are coming in and doing that. Cindy Krupp and Valentine both did a talk on healing last week, and that was awesome. And so that's what that is about. So keep an eye. You got to get the newsletter. The newsletter, we were getting complaints, sort of, and I know Course in Miracles people don't complain, but sometimes they do. There's a lot of emails that go out, and it just made you want to unsubscribe from your best friend. And we cleaned all that up by putting it in a weekly newsletter that the amazing and awesome Therese Atkinson, our photo genius, our camera genius, and she's our web geek, and she's all those cool things. She designed our newsletter template. So everyone please give a nice applause to Therese. You guys can clap too over there. But she's the art and the artist behind that. And then a couple of more announcements. The 40-day group launch is October 1st. If you have any friends that haven't done it, you want it, and they're religious or atheist or AA or nothingness, send them to it, because it helps you to do some self-inquiry. It helps you to discover. A lot of people find their path, different traditions just from starting right there. And then finally, almost finally, I have one more. The 40-day is going to be on an app in less than 30 days. We just got our contract sent over by email this morning to sign off on it, and we're less than 30 days from the 40-day app being available for the world. And then the last thing I want to mention is you can't buy this for this price online. Sorry, you guys, but if you're local, we have these books. We bought 10 of them at the bookstore price. You can have it for $30. And they're $40 if you buy them on Amazon. So $30 for the purple edition. And that's it for announcements. We're happy to have everyone here. Lisa and a bunch of us are on a bus to New York City right now because Lisa's doing her live workshop intensive this weekend. That's going to be about tonight. It's going to be a little bit more on I Requested This. And then this weekend, she's going to roll out some new ideas from the Healing Cure, and she's going to do a teaching on Sunday on prosperity and abundance. So it's going to be a full weekend for those guys that are on their way to New York City. But we're happy to have all of you here, and we're happy to have you with us, live streamers. And we're going to be right back. We're going to do a meet and greet, and then we're going to bring up George MacArthur, our guest from that's traveling through from Florida, and then we'll hear Kelly Russell. So let's have a meet and greet, and live streamers, we'll be right back. I'm going to invite George MacArthur to come up. MacArthur?
Yes, indeed.
George MacArthur, come on up here. He's going to give our thought for the day from the Cafe Gratitude, and George is traveling from Florida. He's a course guy, and he is, you said that you just ran into John Mundy in New York City? Or
No, actually, his home in upstate New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he has a Wednesday night meeting, which is fabulous. If you ever get a chance, please go see him. And then I visited Hugh McCready in Brigantine outside of Atlantic City the night before.
Nice.
And so I'm kind of like making a tour. I've known them for years, so I just wanted to touch their base. And then you guys got me on your mailing list, so I said, I'll come check you guys out.
Good. Thanks. Hey, check out his sweatshirt. The journey is the destination.
Nice.
Nice.
They only sell it on the Blue Ridge Parkway. So,
Yeah.
it came to the, should I grab that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
grab
Okay.
that and give us a thought for the day.
Okay, this is from the 14th Dalai Lama, and it goes like this. We understand each other and work in harmony with one another because it is our responsibility to develop in human beings their natural disposition for peace. So, you said I can make a quick comment?
Yeah.
So, so what are you doing to reach out to others? That's really the point. There's an old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But of course, we don't have enemies, but we have people we disagree with. And so if you get together with people you disagree with, it's amazing how, if you offer love, they start agreeing with you. So anyway, the final is, are you trading comfort for awakening? And so part of awakening, of course, is getting to know your people you don't agree with. So may God bless, and thank you for having me. And this is George MacArthur.
Thank you. Nice. That was awesome, George. Yes. Well, and also part of the discomfort, it reveals to you your discomfort and your preferences and your personal self-identity that just needs to be forgiven, just needs to be looked at, and so that you're not fixed on that. And you can have an experience of living A Course in Miracles, living the peace that you truly are. And welcome, everyone. Come on in. And without further ado, we're going to have a sequel, or what would you call it? A prequel to last week's teaching with Lisa, where she had Vanna. She had Kelly as Vanna White up here as her part of her backdrop. And also you gave some good suggestions last week. Thank you for that. And when you told me that you were going to do a prequel from last week's teaching, I was really grateful for that, because I feel that it's a big topic that can be further investigated and talked about to be helpful for people's noticing their investigation and their freedom that comes from looking, from looking at that place of and taking responsibility. I requested this. It's not that, as you said last week, it's not that you're guilty because you requested this or that. It's taking responsibility for all of your actions, all of your thoughts, all of your feelings, so that you can bring them into the light of your pure expression, of your pure presence, and heal it so that you're no longer experiencing the suffering. It's optional, right? So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Kelly Russell. I'm gonna turn that on and then take that back. There you go. So you should be on.
Hi, everybody. Morning. I stand in the presence.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. So I want to just I got my Jesus here. I got my Course in Miracles. I got my reading glasses so I can actually see the Course in Miracles. I'm going to be reading a little bit from that later. And just want to welcome everybody, say hi to live streamers, and hi to Lisa and the posse that is with her on the way to New York, and best wishes and all the love in the world for your workshop. I know it's going to be great. I made the decision when I was asking Spirit what I was going to teach about today, so I don't want to say I made the decision. That decision was given to me to do kind of a prequel, as Bill said, teaching from yesterday. From last week's teaching, because it is a big topic, and where Lisa started it was where she was guided to start it from the point of I requested this from that prayer in A Course in Miracles. And at the same time, when there began to be a lot of questions coming in about why would I request something so painful. A woman named Carol wrote in about why would I request the death of my husband. We had a gentleman here who talked about his name's, I forgot his name, Michael, sorry. Michael was talking about a painful relationship, and we can all relate that we've all had issues and problems and conflict and illness and loss and just stuff that's been really difficult. And yet it is hard to think about it like I requested this. And so I just wanted to sort of come from a place of clarifying how did we get to the place where we were requesting this. And so it's kind of like a leading up to where, I feel like, to where Lisa started it. And we got a cute little baby there in the back that is just, she's like a little cheerleader, man. She's given the exclamation points for, for some of the stuff that hopefully that I'm saying that she hopefully agrees with. I'm just going to take that as agreement. And so I want to just go into, so our history, and when I say our history, meaning who we really are and where we really came from, not our history as human beings in this world or in this universe, but our history as how did we get to the place, how did we get here, how did we get to the place where there is even a place of pain and suffering that we experience. Because I think it's really important to give the background of it. And I know that we all, if we're students of A Course in Miracles, we've all been exposed to it. We all know it to some degree. And yet, the ego mind, we wake up every day thinking that we're in a body. And so as long as we're waking up every day thinking we're in a body, we're going to be experiencing the problems that are associated with the world of duality, right? We're going to have death, we're going to have grief, we're going to have illness, we're going to have financial issues or conflict in relationships, or the car breaks down, or somebody acts like an asshole, or whatever. We're going to have all of those kinds of things that go on in the world of form. And so I think it's really important that, if we're only if we've read the Course in Miracles and we've sort of been exposed to the idea of where we all came from, but if it's not like drilled down into our consciousness on a regular basis, the ego mind wants us to think that this world is really what reality is, and that this is really real. And the reason why we even have all the problems that are associated with this world is because it's the ego mind's attempt to make us, to gain our allegiance that this world is what the reality is, and that there is no other reality. And so look how real it is, look how painful it is, look how hard it is. Or look how much you want something, and look how great it can be. And it's going to be awesome if you can just get that, and that like tyranny of wanting. So taking us back to who we really are at first. So who we really are as an expression of God. So the Course in Miracles says the only difference between us and God is that God created us. We did not create him. Otherwise, we're exactly the same. It's as if, the Course in Miracles talks about creation by extension. So it's just like, and I've said this before, I kind of think of like a giant amoeba, where it's just moving around and it has these arms, right? And they're still connected, but they like extend off, and it just goes off into like the space under the microscope. And that is the amoeba like extending itself and creating. And I just think of God like that, and that's just what we are. The difference is we don't ever pop off and become another organism. We're still just part of that huge, all-encompassing cloud of love that is God. That's who we are. You cut us, we bleed God. We breathe God. God shines out our eyes. God comes forth in our words. Like, that's who we really are. And so before we ever thought we were separated, before we ever had that tiny mad idea, when we were just with God, as part of God, being in that blissful place of light and love and peace that is really beyond our ability to perceive in this world. But if you think about the best day you ever had, where you felt the most love and the most contentment, and like everything was okay and everything was wonderful, and that everything was going your way, and it was all green lights, and you were surrounded by everyone that you love, and you just couldn't perceive anything bad happening on that day or at that time in your life. If you can think about that and then add a perfect orgasm to it, and then times it by a bazillion, you'd be getting sort of close to what oneness probably feels like. Okay, just to sort of clarify it for everybody. So in case, is everybody there now?
Yes.
Okay. And so we're in that place because that is what oneness is, only perfect. If God is a being of perfect love, then all we can be in oneness is that same perfect love, right? So that's where we are, and it's all good. And then, as the Course in Miracles says, into eternity, where all was one, there crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh, right? So we should have just laughed at it, been like, oh my God, that's so ridiculous that I could ever go off on my own, that I could ever be not in this place, that I could ever be separate, that I could ever not be in oneness. And we would have just gone on our merry way and been totally cool. But what happened instead is that we had that tiny mad idea, and there are two things about that. The first thing about it is it was over in a nanosecond. It was healed in a nanosecond. It's like it never happened. And nothing ever came of it. And there was no effect of it. We never left God. We are still right now at home in that place that I just described, at home with God, with all of us. So we never left there. That I'm speaking to you like a hologram, like I'm a Star Trek. Any Star Trek fans here? Any Trekkies or Star Wars? Well, yeah, I'm doing like the Obi-Wan thing right here. I am like speaking in a hologram because the reality is I'm in a place that with all of you that we never left, and we're still having that awesome experience. However, at that time, it also created an illusory split in our minds. And we fell into, like the Bible says, Adam fell into a deep sleep, and it doesn't talk about him waking up anywhere. So it's like we fell into this dream, and this dream is one of separation. So in this dream, it birthed the part of our mind that we think of as our ego mind, that split part of our mind. And it caused the Big Bang to happen. Right? Now, okay, we have to just keep reminding ourselves, which never really happened, right? Because this is all a dream. So instead I'll say it caused the dream of the Big Bang to happen. It caused the dream of separation to happen. So now we've got two parts, seemingly two parts to our mind. We've got the actual, real, true, authentic part of ourselves that is at home with God, having the big O, being in bliss, being at peace, partying, it's awesome, we're all one, it's great. And then we have this part that feels like it's split. And because it is split off and feels like it is split off from God, it's going to go into this place of I'm alone, I'm separate, I am small, I'm powerless, I separated from God, so I essentially rejected God, and I suck. That's awful. I did the worst thing you could possibly do. I basically threw everything in God's face and said, who needs you? And I'm out of here, and,
Or why are you
whatever.
doing this to me?
Yeah. Well, I think that came, I'm going to get to that,
Okay.
right? So, but in the beginning, it was feeling an incredible sense of guilt. Guilt in our minds because we believed that we had separated from our Father, and not just separated like, yeah, I separated, we'll get back together down the road, I'll go back home, it'll be good, I'll just call and say, hey, my bad, sorry, I didn't mean it. I'm going to catch like the next bus, and and it would have been really cool if we would have done that, actually, because God would have been like, bro, I totally get it. Yep. In fact, guess what? You never left. Like, you're just dreaming. I got you right here. You're right here next to me, right here. So just come on back, and you'll wake up, and it'll all be good. But instead, that didn't happen because we just continued with this dream, and this dream turns into a straight up nightmare. And it is all kinds of stuff that we never had before, we never experienced before, because none of that happens in oneness, right? And so the ego mind, the split part of our mind, it's still in our mind. It's not like it's some monster, it's not like it's somewhere outside of ourselves, and it's not even real, but in this dream, the ego mind starts talking to us, and it's like, you're screwed. Like, you have rejected God. You've basically killed him. You basically killed God. You are a murderer. You are guilty. You're beyond salvation. There's no hope for you. The only thing that you could possibly do is hide. Because if God finds you, because of course the ego mind wants us to believe that God is a punishing God, a jealous God, a God that is going to visit consequences on us. I mean, that's where that whole thing was born, that whole punishing God idea, that God is somehow going to get us and teach us a lesson, and, you know, because we sinned against him, right? And we didn't. We just had an error thought that was over in 2 seconds and didn't really have any consequences, but we're dreaming that they did. You know, it's as if you have something happen out to you out in the world. It's as if you have like a near miss, like you almost get into like a horrible car accident or something, and then it's like a dodged bullet. You don't even know what happened, but somehow you swerve at the right time and at the right way, and you just feel like there was some kind of divine intervention, and you avoid what you totally could have been a terrible, horrendous, fiery, painful car crash, and later on you're just pulling over the side of the road and your heart's going a million miles an hour and you're just like, oh my God. You know, and then later that night you have a dream about it and you have a nightmare about it, and the accident actually happens in your nightmare, and you're dreaming all about it as if you're just in it, and it's horrible, and it's like the nightmare, you can't wake up from it. So I perceive it kind of like that, right? So then the ego mind is like, well, you got to hide somewhere, right? So I have this idea of a physical universe and a body and other bodies. And you could go there and you could be God. I mean, God won't be able to find you there. He doesn't even know about it. And you can be God, and you can be in control of everything, and it'll all be great. And then you don't have to worry about any of this. You don't have to worry about being punished, and it'll all be really great. And we're like, really? Really? Okay, well, okay, yeah, let's do that. Okay. And so, this is kind of metaphorical to what happened, but so now evolution starts. Right? So evolution is just part of the physical world. It's not that evolution isn't true. It's that if you think about this world and how this world was created and all the intricacies of this world, because I hear a lot of people say, well, how could God not have created, this world, the intricacy of the body and how beautiful the things work together and how the systems work and the sunsets and the nature and all of that. And it's like, yeah, not God creating that, because all of that stuff that I just talked about also is changeable. And it can change and it can die. And two things that heaven isn't, and that God isn't, and that the creation of God isn't, is anything is changeable, it's changeless, and it's eternal. So anything that could change or could die is not of God. It's not a creation of God. However, God created us, right? And as an extension of God, our minds are incredibly creative. And so we create something in our mind, like our collective mind creating something like the world. It is going to be awesome. It is going to be, and when I say awesome, I mean awesomely intelligent. So it's going to be intricate, and it's going to be complex, and it's going to have all these things that do work together and are amazing in how intricately they work together, and how crazy advanced they are. But that's also a trick of the ego, because the ego makes everything really complicated. And the more complicated it is, the more we have to believe in it as truth. How could something not be real and not be true if it's so complex, right? And this world is like our mind's replication of heaven, of oneness. It's like what we tried to get, it's like we're trying to build, we were trying to build like a model of heaven and oneness. And so we have to have all these different moving parts. We have to have this really complicated body with all of these systems so that it can breathe, and so that it can walk around, and so that it can procreate, and so that it can have experiences and do whatever. And so all of that, it's just in oneness, it just is. We're not limited by anything. We don't have to think about how to get from one place to another, because we're everywhere in oneness. There is no body, there is no limitation, there is nothing that needs to work, because there's nothing to have to try to do. Right? But in this world, this is like we're trying to recreate this. So we have this intense feeling of guilt. That's what I want to go back to, is that even in this world, we bought into the ego's idea thinking, okay, good, we're going to go into a world of form, and we're going to go into a body, and we're going to go into a material place, and we're not going to have any guilt. We're going to feel like everything's okay. Except guess what? The ego is a fucking liar. And so that didn't happen. and a lot of you know I'm a therapist and a coach, and I hear more often than anything from people, the one thing that I could say is pervasive among so many people is this feeling of being wrong, this feeling of being guilty, this feeling of not being good enough. And even when it's not good enough, people will say to me, like, I just feel guilty, like, all the time, and I don't know why. And like I did something, but I don't think I did, but I just feel guilty. And people are always saying, I'm sorry. There's a big I'm sorry epidemic in the world about, you bump into somebody, I'm sorry. You drop something on the floor, I'm sorry. It's like, I'm sorry. It's like a belief we have. I am a sorry being. Because when you feel guilty, that is how you feel. You feel like you're just a sorry, just a big old sorry, right? So that's a place that we're coming from this guilt place. But, and anybody who's trained in psychology will tell you that it's very difficult to sit with guilt. It's very difficult to accept a feeling of guilt. That we can do it for a little while, and then something is going to happen. We are either going to do something to punish ourselves, because there's this sense of guilt. It's very difficult to sit with guilt and be able to just forgive ourselves for it. Because first of all, that doesn't occur to us, because if we're feeling guilty, we are listening to the ego part of our mind. And the very, 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 very last thing that the ego part of our mind is going to suggest is that we forgive ourselves and not feel guilty. It doesn't even know what the word forgive means. It's like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about right now. And so we're not going to do that. So we feel guilty, and the normal response to guilt is projection. I have to get rid of it. I have to get it out of me. I can't feel this. And you can see it in just your everyday life. You can see it if you pay attention with yourself, and you can see it when you pay attention to other people. But my suggestion is, if you're seeing it when you pay attention to yourself or other people, that you do so with a consciousness of not making them guilty and not making yourself guilty while you're observing it, right? But that what will happen is, when somebody feels guilty, they will project it outward, and they will eventually make it somebody else's fault. I hear people a lot talking about themselves and how they feel guilty and how they feel like they're not good enough. But if we talk about it long enough, it was my parents. It was the teachers. It was the world. It was because of this and because of that. And they're not faulting people for that, because that's what we were set up to do. We were set up to find somebody else responsible. And even if we're not saying somebody else is responsible, or we're set up to feel like we are responsible but feel guilty about being responsible. So that's the place where we're coming from, is now we just have all this guilt. So in projecting it outward, what has to happen first is, it's very difficult to project guilt outward if you're still feeling it. So you have to deny it first. You have to repress it and suppress it and deny it and pretend like whatever made you feel guilty in the first place, whatever you did, or whatever you supposedly did, never happened, right? So you have to wall it off in your mind, like just never happened. And you know, denial is one of those words like that has its roots in psychology, but has kind of just become part of our lexicon. You know, how people toss around, oh, I'm so bipolar, oh, I'm so ADD, oh, I'm so, you know, oh, he's so in denial. Like, those are psychological terms that describe a state of the mind of being in, right? So we wall it all off in our mind, like we have no idea anymore that we have any guilt, so that we can try to get back to the place of feeling innocent, which is what our natural state is complete innocence. But we don't feel innocent. So we have to suppress and wall off and deny our guilt so we can try to feel innocent. But it doesn't really work. It's like fake innocent. So from our fake innocent place, our denial makes our guilt go into the unconscious. And so now all of our guilt is still there, but it's unconscious to us. And so now that's what's running us. That's what we're responding to, is we're responding to our unconscious guilt. And so what are we going to do if we feel unconsciously guilty? So now we're getting ready to incarnate. You know, and I know people think that when we're in a place before we come into this world, I know people think of it as being that's heaven. It isn't. We're not coming from heaven into this world. When we're in heaven, and we have unwound the ego to the point where we are waking up and we are not dreaming we are in the universe and world of form anymore. When we're between worlds and we're getting ready to come in here, that's still the ego framework. You know, it is. Because it's still duality. It's still, I'm a soul and I'm going to go into the world. Okay, so we're separate. Well, I'm going to go into the world, I'm going to go into a body. As soon as we believe we're going to go into a body, we're not in oneness anymore. So we may be in an unencumbered by the body place when we're between worlds, but we're still believing we're guilty enough to where we have to go into a body, and we have to go into an incarnation, and we have to deal with all the stuff that's here, right? So when we're in that place, we're getting ready to go into the world, we are setting up our lives, right? And this is the place where we talk about we choose our companions, and we form our sacred contracts, and you're going to be my wife, and I'm going to be your child, and you're going to be my mom, and we're going to have these various experiences, and it's going to be for me to learn and all of that. So there's a part of our mind that is, like Lisa was talking about last week, there's a part of our mind that is like, this is going to be a gift for me to develop something positive, right? That this is going to be, for me to be able to look at this as looking at it with spirit. Like, I am going to cultivate some quality that I need in going into this relationship and having this experience. But the other part of our minds is looking at it like it's punishment. Like, I'm going to go into this relationship and it's going to be terrible and it's going to be abusive, or I'm going to have some body problem, or some kind of be born into some kind of a very difficult situation, or a culture that is at war, or whatever it is that we set up from the ego's framework, from the ego part of our mind. We set our life up on this continuum of punishments, one after the other. We basically schedule it out for our whole lives, that I'm going to go through this, I'm going to go through this, I'm going to go through this, I'm going to go through this. Why? So when people are asking, why would I do that to myself? It's because we have this sense of unconscious guilt that we have to punish ourselves. And it's not just punish ourselves because we were bad. Like, you were bad and now you have to be punished. Because we're the ones doing it. Why would we do that? Why wouldn't we just let ourselves off the hook and be like, yeah, I was bad, but you know what? I'm going to skip the punishment part, and I'm just going to be like, I'm good. It's because we're afraid that we're going to be punished by God. We are afraid because we have now projected our unconscious guilt not only onto other people in the world, like our brothers, but we have projected our unconscious guilt onto God. And so now we do two things. One is we think God is really pissed off and he's going to punish me, and so I have to punish myself first. I basically have to punish myself so that God won't. And the other thing that we do is we twist that sense of guilt around and project it onto God and say, God is doing this to me. Why is God doing this to me? Why did God give me cancer? Why did God take my husband away? Why did God make me have this terrible accident? Why is God not letting me be rich? Why is God making my partner be such a jerk? You know, why does God make suffering happen? Why does God create people who have disabilities? You know, all these questions about, I will tell you that is the one thing about A Course in Miracles that sold me, is it was the only thing that I ever read in all of my spiritual study that actually answered the question about why is there suffering in the world. It was, guess what? God isn't doing it. Right. And when I read that, it was like, okay, I'm sold. You know, it's the only thing that made any sense to me, is that why would a loving God? Why would a loving God? And it's like, a loving God wouldn't. And a loving God didn't. And we are doing this to ourselves from a place of unconscious guilt. So going back to what Lisa was talking about last week, we have these things that we've set up in our lives. And when we go through them, so yeah, we requested them. We requested them to be a vehicle for our unconscious guilt, to act itself out, so that we can feel like victims. What'd you say?
So we can expand to the universe of what we see.
Well, so that there's two ways to look at these things that we requested, which is what Lisa was talking about last week. There's one way to look at it where we can feel victimized, where we can feel where she was asking about, like, so what do we get out of it? And she was talking about her own experience of having sickness, and that what it allowed her to do. That what these experiences, when we look at them as if we look at them from the ego's standpoint, what those difficult experiences allow us to do, the place they allow us to stay. They allow us to hide. They allow us to stay isolated. They allow us to stay victimized, to blame other people, to feel sorry for ourselves, to feel like we are in scarcity, to feel bad about ourselves, to feel like we're not good enough, to feel like it's other people's fault. So that's why one of the reasons why she had us do that exercise of looking at all of the things that we perceive as being negatives or difficulties or challenges in our lives, and what we are getting out of them from an ego standpoint. And everything that we are getting out of them, and the answer to why we would do that, is because of our sense of unconscious guilt. That if we invite all these things and we have all these things happen, then somehow the ego mind wants us to believe that it will assuage our unconscious guilt, and it will somehow redeem us, except not really. Because you have to remember, the ego mind has no concept of us not being in this world. As far as the ego mind is concerned, everything is this world. Everything ends when our body dies. It's all about the body. It's all about taking care of the body and feeding the body and making sure the body's okay and protecting the body and getting money so the body can be more comfortable and doing fun things with the body and doing fun things with other bodies. And it's all designed for us to, like, have this all be real and have it all be like, isn't this just captivates us, and it just captures us, and we're just addicted to it, right? And so then Lisa, with the way that she presented the other way of looking at what these experiences are that we have going on, is looking at them from a how can I grow from this standpoint? How can this be a gift to me? How can this provide contrast for me so that I might decide to do something better? How might I call something forth in myself to galvanize me, to say, I don't want this to limit me. So maybe I've been sick and whatever, but I'm just gonna be like, whatever, and I'm gonna go out in the world and do what I wanna do. And I'm not gonna let this limit me. I'm gonna look at this. It requires us to look at our challenges and our difficulties with Holy Spirit. And that's what the Course in Miracles is saying. It's not saying stick your head in the sand and pretend like none of this is happening and paint everything, pink and it's all unicorns and rainbow tears and all that. It's saying, no, look at what you created, but not with guilt. Look at it with Holy Spirit so that you can see that everything you created was for the purpose of reinforcing your feeling that you're separate from God. But that's our entire purpose here. That's what this world's purpose is. That's what the purpose of this universe is. It's the purpose of the body. It's the purpose of everything that we do that we don't do consciously otherwise, right? And so the Course in Miracles has given us this amazing tool to be able to undo the ego mind, to be able to change our perception of our brothers and change our perception of what happens in the world, and allow us to unwind the ego to the point where we don't believe that we're a body anymore, that we don't believe there's a world anymore, and that eventually we will stop waking up thinking that we are in a world, and we will actually be back home with God. And it doesn't have to be where we just wait every morning, okay, oh, fuck, I'm still in a body. Like, okay, I guess I gotta get up and be in a body today. It's like, no, this is an ongoing process that we actually can encompass everything in this seeming world, to see it as a dream, but to encompass it as, this is all my dream, and it's okay. It's not okay meaning I have to identify with it and feel like it's real and be in pain and be in suffering and think it sucks and feel victimized by it and feel hurt and harmed and like it's awful. It means that we can look at it all and be like, whew, so glad it's only a dream. And looking at it above the battleground, looking in it, going from horizontal perception, right, where we're just seeing everything as being here, and everything is coming at me, and everything is really happening, and everything is real. I know, I totally get it. See, that little baby's totally expressing how looking at this world and identifying with it really is, right? It makes us all want to burst into tears and bawl our eyes out, right? I know it does me. And the reality is, if we can look at it all like it's just this bubble. This is just my dream. And look what's happening in my dream today. Look what I created in my dream. I created this financial scarcity so that I could feel less than other people, so that I could feel like I don't get to do fun things, so that I could feel guilty and bad for not being able to pay bills, or so that I could feel like I have a crappy credit rating, so that I could then not be able to have the stuff that I wanted. Look at how I did that as an expression of my unconscious guilt. If we just put that tagline on the end of everything that we see ourselves doing in this world that we perceive as negative, look what I Look what my mind created as an expression of my unconscious guilt. But the truth is, I'm completely innocent. The truth is, I'm just dreaming this. And so I can encompass the dream. It's like I can hold the dream. I don't have to see it as something separate and outside of myself that's happening to me. I can notice that this is what I appear to be doing to myself, or this is what I want to believe other people are doing to me. Oh, look at me wanting to make you guilty. Look at me doing that. Like, look at how I'm doing that. Look at how I'm trying to make you be my bastard husband. Look at how I'm trying to make you be my abusive parent. Look at how I'm trying to make you be somebody who abandoned me or victimized me. And the truth is, none of that, we can also look at it like, I'm in it. And this is all happening. And we can make it really real. We can over-identify with it. That's what the ego would love us to do. So the Course in Miracles, in asking us to trust it, in asking us to read the text, in asking us to do the lessons, and asking us to practice its version of forgiveness, is exactly that, so that we can notice, we can start to notice and see how our ego mind is at work, and that we have the choice. And that when we choose with the ego, when we request, when we see these things that happen to us that are bad, as we requested this, the genesis of us requesting it from an ego perspective is so we would have a place to put our unconscious guilt and blame it on something. And the truth is, we don't have to blame anything on anyone. So the Course has given us this amazing tool. And the forgiveness of the Course, I mean, it has changed my life. The forgiveness practice in the Course is what has helped me to be able to sustain, when I'm able to, the sense of being able to look at this as just look at look at what isn't really happening, but this play that I'm creating, this story, this narrative that I'm creating with all of these characters to make myself feel like crap. And so the Course's version of forgiveness is designed to shift our perception back to reality, which is we're not forgiving people in the world. Because I know people will talk to me and just be like, but I can't forgive that because it was so terrible, whatever so-and-so did. We're not forgiving people. The Course in Miracles doesn't say, forgive your brother for what he did. It doesn't say, forgive your parents for abusing you. It doesn't say, forgive your spouse for abandoning you, or forgive your child for, doing whatever that they're doing or whatever. The Course in Miracles teaches us to forgive. This is why it's different in the Course in Miracles than it is in the definition of forgiveness for the rest of the world, is that the Course in Miracles teaches us to forgive ourselves in our own minds for what never happened. We're basically just forgiving ourselves for dreaming. We're just forgiving ourselves for buying into the ego's bullshit illusion and then making it real and then acting like it's real. And, it's like if you're going to like a reenactment, like you're going to I happen to love the King Richard's Fair, and I like to go there and dress up in costume and be in medieval times and watch the jousting and do all that stuff, and I think it's awesome. However, I do know that it's me dressing up in a costume, going to a fair, and then walking into King Richard's realm where it looks like it's in medieval, wherever, Middle Earth or something, and I know that I'm there. It's not that I suddenly forgot and I just become that character and I'm just like, this is reality. It's like knowing it, but playing along with it. And if we can do that in this world, if we can know that who we really are is absolute, beloved extensions of God, whole, perfect, pure light and pure love, that is who we are, And we are temporarily just dreaming this world, and we can just encircle it. We can embrace it as if it's just all in our bubble. We don't have to make any of it bad. We don't have to name any of it. We don't have to make any of it mean anything. You know, that's where we suffer in this world, is we make meaning out of freaking everything. You know, what does it mean? And the Course in Miracles says that it's the ego mind that asks questions. Incessant questioning. And one of those questions is, well, what does this mean? What does it mean? Who's at fault? Who's to blame? And what are we going to do about it? The what are we going to do about it is actually a righteous question. That's actually the only question that really matters, which is we're going to forgive it and just let it go back into the nothingness from which it came. And so when we have things that happen that appear to happen in the world with other people and with relationships in particular, and we touched last week on death, because death of a loved one is the closest thing that we have in this world to the pain that we experience, the psychic pain that we experienced when we believed that we separated from God. That's our replication of it. And the truth is, in our reality where we never left, it's not like I'm back in the excuse me, it's not like I'm back in the reality and you guys are all here, you know, or it's not like, you know, only Course in Miracles people are back in the reality and everyone else is here. Like where the ego mind goes with it is, well, if I wake up, if I let myself undo, I mean, not that the ego would ever say, let myself undo the ego, but what the ego throws up all its defenses around is not to go down this road. Throw your Course in Miracles in the garbage. Don't even study this. It's a bunch of crap, like whatever. But what it's really afraid of is that we will abandon it and it will not be able to be the boss of it. And if we truly remember who we are and that we never left God, it means we're all together never left God. So when somebody appears to die in this world, it's the death of their body, and it is very painful in a similar way to when you get your arm cut off in this world. It is very painful, and I'm not saying that it's not. And the Course in Miracles was to say to deny what we experience in this world is a particularly unworthy form of denial, because it's like saying this isn't really happening, except we don't really believe that. And so it's just another denial. Rather, to look at it with the Holy Spirit and say, for me to believe that my beloved died and their life ended, and I will never see them again, I will never experience them again, and they are just gone. That's what the ego would like us to believe. And that thought, that feeling is so incredibly painful. Instead of saying their body died and they're not a body and I'm not a body. And the reality is we are never apart. We were never apart. We were never apart before we met. We were never apart before we were born. There's no time where we were ever apart, and there will never ever be a time when we are not apart. We just appear to be apart in the dream. And we have to feel how we feel in the dream. We have to go through the emotions that we feel in the dream. I was a grief counselor for many years before I had my own practice, and that's one of the things that is absolutely true, is that people have to feel what they feel. We have to feel the emotions that we feel. We have emotions as humans in this world, and so we have to feel whatever we feel. But we can feel whatever we feel, knowing that these emotions I'm having and this experience how I feel about this experience that I'm having is part of this dream. It's not who I am. It's not going to be forever. It's not the permanent state of things. Because when you think about it, feelings, I mean, we don't have any feeling forever, or even sometimes 5 minutes. You know, and even the trajectory of grief goes from being really constant for a while to being more kind of like a roller coaster, and then the peaks and valleys become, further and further apart, and eventually it becomes more like bursts here and there of, really intense feeling, and then I'm okay, and then really intense feeling, and then I'm okay. So we know it's part of the ego world because it changes. Even our emotions change. And some of us, particularly of a certain age, the emotions go woo, 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 like every minute. That's really fun. But in the reality of where we truly are, there are no separate emotions. There's one state, and it's bliss. Absolute, unending, unchanging, perfect bliss. And so when we practice forgiveness in this world of we're forgiving the dream, every time we do that, we're getting closer and closer and closer and closer to where we will be in that place of bliss all the time. What I've noticed about practicing forgiveness is that when I forgive my dream that something's terrible or not how I want it to be, or somebody's acting a certain way, or whatever meaning I'm making, it transforms. It transforms my experience in the world, and I don't feel like that anymore. And that is really, the more that we can transform our experience in the world to be one of something that we are judging and saying is terrible and making meaning of, to just, this is just an illusory world and I'm not even here, and that's just something that I was having to dream to make myself feel guilty, and I don't have to do that, and I can just go back to being who I really am, my reality as a perfect son of God that just happens to be dreaming this crazy dream right now. And that I'm more and more every day, every time I practice forgiveness, every time I remember my oneness, every time I see the face of Christ in my brother, I remember more and more who I am. And I will, at some point, remember who I am so fully that I will not be dreaming that I'm in a body anymore. And so in the meantime, when we find ourselves having these experiences that we feel like are challenging, we practice forgiveness around them, and we go back to what Lisa was talking about last week, where we realize that we have the choice to either see them through the eyes of the ego and see ourselves as victimized and all of that, or we can look at that and say, what am I getting out of that? What am I getting out of setting that scenario up for myself? What does it allow me to do to get away with? How does it allow me to not be the fullest expression of who I am in the world? How do I allow it to keep me small? And what action do I need to take to transform it into the gift that I can see it as, so that I can actually be my fullest expression in the world? And it can be something that can be an inspiration for me to galvanize me, instead of something that is going to keep me small. Yes, Bill, microphone. Do you have it?
Thank you.
Is that on? No?
Oh, maybe I turned this one off. Oh, yeah, I turned this one off. Okay. Test one. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that awesome description of living the dream. Living
But
the
not
dream.
really.
Row, row, row your boats
Gently down the
stream.
Merrily, merrily.
Yeah, I love those
merrily.
those what do you call
nursery
it?
rhymes?
Nursery rhymes. Yeah, they're actually
Yeah.
so true.
A lot of wisdom in
right?
those.
It's there's someone online that had a really, it looked like a very urgent kind of a comment. But before we take that, or other hands that went up, I want to mention that I really like the way when you described the way grief or the death of someone, when it comes on you, if it's depending on how close it is. At first, it's like very extreme, and then as you as it as the emotions, they sort of spread out, and they're not so often, and then they come sort of in a more of a roller,
Like wave.
yeah,
roller
like a
coaster.
wave. Or I mean, first it's a bigger roller coaster, and it's more intense, but then it sort of spreads out and spreads out, and it seems like that's awakening also. It seems like at first you're like, when you first hear these ideas and you first hear the idea that this is a dream and none of this is real, at first it's like, can that be true? And then you go, well, maybe it is. And then when you start using forgiveness as a way of releasing your suffering, it seems like at first it's like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and it's like if something was really disturbing your peace, really upsetting you, it's very intense. But after you practice looking at it with spirit and looking at it from your true self, it does get further and further apart, not so often, and then finally, all of a sudden you notice that it's not even there anymore.
Don't have a charge on it.
And awakening is like that too. When you first wake up to these ideas, at first it's like extreme, and things do trigger you. And then when you practice forgiveness, it's less and less and less and less. And in my personal experience, the dream state is like that as well, where I'm not bothered by very much at all. Some things trigger me, and I bring it in and look at it, notice it, but otherwise the wave is pretty wavy. I mean, it's pretty gentle. It's not so intense. It's not scary. It's not attached to fear like it used to be.
Right.
It's more of a noticing.
Yeah.
And the internal teacher is so much more present
Yeah.
that it's not the primary source of direction. The spirit is more the primary source of direction. So it's probably not a word, but it sort of gentilizes it.
It's a word now.
Yeah,
It's a
it sort
free
of
word.
gentilizes your experience of being in the world, and it becomes a much calmer, more gentle space.
Yeah, it
to,
does.
to be. So that's my experience. Is
And-
that what your experience
And I
is?
think it's the
Yeah.
happy dream,
Yeah.
I think is what you're talking about, is that when you start to encompass thinking like that, and you allow the inner teacher to be your guide, and you practice forgiveness, and you are able to look at things with spirit rather than from the ego perspective, it's still a dream. We're still waking up in a body here, but it's the happy dream. And the happy dream
Yes.
is the runway to waking up at home and having this universe disappear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, a lucid dream, exactly. It's
Yes.
a lucid
dream. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Awakening.
Yeah.
Exactly, awakening
Yeah.
to that.
So
Did
I
somebody
just
else
wanted
have
to-
a
was there
thank you
another
so much,
hand
Bill.
up?
I loved what you said. Thank you.
Trees had
I
her-
love the analogy between the sort of the grief journey and the awakening journey.
Yes.
Awakening from the grief of this, believing that this is real, right? Yeah. Yes.
We have two people online that have questions or reflections
Yeah.
that I'd like to share with you.
Yeah.
One person is asking, what about no ego at all? Eliminating the ego. Is there not some ego needed to survive this world?
The eliminating the ego, and isn't there some ego needed to survive this world? I guess what I would say is that from a Course in Miracles standpoint, our task here is we're not trying to survive this world. We're actually trying, and we're not just trying, but we are succeeding in practicing what we're learning in the Course in Miracles in our minds to be able to remember who we are and where we really are, which is not in this world, which is in oneness. This world is a dream, and so we don't need anything to survive this world. That's like saying, what do we need to survive a dream? What we need to survive a dream is to wake up from it. And so that's really what we're doing. And so no, I would say that no ego is necessary for any reason whatsoever. Next question.
And
Can I counter that?
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
mind if I counter that?
No?
I want to. I'm not challenging you. That statement to me is has another version that we are in forgiveness. We're including the ego and that thought it was separate from its source. And in that inclusion of the ego that thought it was separate, it's softening, it's actually coming into the leadership and the direction of spirit. And so spirit is now directing the mind
Yes.
that's in the dream. So it's no longer
Yes.
being directed by the separate self.
Right.
It's being more infused from divinity, with divinity
Yep.
driving the bus. And that's how the happy dream occurs.
Yes. And
So
I actually
I think the
agree with
ego is
that.
still used.
It's not that I think the ego isn't still used. I think that the question was, don't we need the ego to survive the dream? And that's the question I was answering. And
Right.
I completely agree
Yes.
with what you're saying,
yes.
that because one of the things the Course in Miracles says is that the ego can learn, and that our practicing of A Course in Miracles is bringing everything under the direction of Holy
Yeah.
Spirit,
Yeah.
ego included.
Right. Yeah, so we don't actually need the ego, but the ego that thought it was an ego is the separate self that is gradually infused back into the oneness that
Yeah.
it never left.
Yep.
And then
being
it's in
reabsorbed.
service even in what seems to be time and space.
Right, which is where, when we're still waking up in a body, as you said, it becomes the happy dream, because we're giving its allegiance to the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And allowing, if our ego was completely undone, unless we were like a Jesus figure, we wouldn't be sustaining a body.
Yes.
But we are, and we can still use that as a communication device. We can use it as a vehicle for love.
Right.
As long as we appear
Yeah.
to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank
I love
you.
your
Well,
comment.
didn't we have a second
Thank you.
question?
I think we did have a second
We
question.
did, we had a second question
Finish it
online.
and then we'll go.
Yep. Yep, no worries.
It's not really a question, but it's somebody commenting that they're feeling like they need help because they're in deep grief and a survivor of abandonment issues in childhood. And I'm wondering if you could add anything based on what you've been teaching today to that person's experience, what they're sharing.
That I absolutely support getting help if you feel like you're struggling with something. There's, the ego would believe that we have to struggle alone, and so I would say to reach out for help, whether it is reaching out with counseling or reaching out for help with one of the Teachers of God programs, or reaching out for help in some other avenue. But I would absolutely encourage reaching out for help, and that none of us has to struggle alone. We're not alone. We're actually all one. So that even that idea that we have to struggle alone that's a separation idea. So yeah, I would absolutely suggest getting help, and that's the most self-loving thing that you can do in that situation. Yes. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
So, everything you were saying too, there's a guy called Ram Dass who's been around forever, and
Yes, he has.
the whole thing is learning to, the ego is unnecessary, just as us being here is,
Yeah.
if you want to go Course in Miracles route.
Yes.
But we are here in our minds. We are here, we think. And the ego, actually, one of the things I've learned from this Ram Dass is to walk up to it in my mind when something seems like it's happening, the dream, the ego lying to me, and say, okay, I see your jealousy, I see your fear, I send you love, I'm giving you light, and now I'm going to have to send her back to my source. And it's something I learned from Ram Dass, because it's almost giving love to the ego instead of saying it's not here and I hate the ego and I've got to kill the ego and I've got to get rid of the ego, because that only makes it worse. It's kind of like the war on
Makes it real.
drugs get bigger.
Right.
The war on poverty gets bigger.
Right.
Instead, embracing the love and the light and looking at it, it's unraveling the ego for me every time I walk up to it and say, I see you, I acknowledge you, but now I'm going to have to go back to source. It's almost like, to me, the ego is almost like that little child, that bully that's trying to get attention from me
Yeah.
and get me to react to it. And the more I react with love to it, almost not saying to love the ego, but to react to it with love, it diffuses it. And that's one thing Ram Dass taught, I learned from that, is when you walk up to it and you acknowledge it and you give it love like you would a bully, it doesn't know what to do with that, and it stops. Try it, and it stops. So when that thought's coming and I go into it, it stops. Why? Because of not just Course of Miracles, but my AA, writing a 4-step, looking at my resentments, which 99% weren't real, were fancied, were never happening. What I thought people were doing to me wasn't happening.
Right.
My mother wasn't trying to torture me. People weren't doing those things. To be able to release all that with love opens that channel for me, so that I know that this whole place is lying to me, but I can't just walk around and go, this isn't real, I'm not real, this isn't real, this isn't real.
Right.
Because that's also the ego playing a lie to me. Because
Right.
I think it is. And things happen, and now I can say, let me look at that. Okay, so this person did this to me to awaken me that I am the light, because I can connect to source, and I can say, I forgive the dream and I forgive the lie of the ego, because all that actor was doing was helping me see that this isn't real and that I am the light of the world.
Exactly. Thank you. Well said. And what you're talking about is also the result of practicing forgiveness, right? Because that's exactly what forgiveness does, is it reconnects you with the light in the other person, and it's overlooking the ego. We're not trying to say the ego, we want to kill the ego, and the ego isn't here, and the ego, what we're saying is we're undoing it with love. We're unraveling it, undoing it, unwinding it, all of those kind of words. We had one more question back here. Thank you. Thank you, Laura.
We like to
Well, too late now.
Okay. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
So actually, my question was kind of related to her question, so you kind of answered.
Okay.
But when you said that before we came to this dream or reality,
Yes.
we made a plan based on our ego mind,
Mm-hmm.
and that was planned for us to have a certain life, met certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, using the beliefs of Course of Miracles, do you believe that we can change that? So let's say I'm living this dream, but can I make it better, or without thinking that it's a punishment? Because I also
Yeah.
believe that we can live this reality without thinking and being still having the thought that I'm one with the Creator or God,
Yes.
or
Yes.
but being here and being thankful for being here and believing, yes, enjoying it.
Yes.
So
And
that's, yes.
I actually think that that's what the Course in Miracles is trying to teach us how to do, is that while we appear to be here, I mean, the Holy Spirit is like a bridge between where our reality is, where we never left, home we never left, and where we think we are. And the teaching of A Course in Miracles, I think, is exactly that, to help us to transform things that the ego would have us believe are punishments. And that's part of what Lisa was talking about last week, and being able to transform them to gifts by the way that we're looking at them and by the meaning that we're making of them. And that forgiveness helps us to do that. It helps us to not only realize that this is a dream, but to dissolve the guilt. And the guilt is the part that makes us feel like it's a punishment. And so, we can look at anything that happens in the world, and it's the meaning that we're making of it that makes it feel like a punishment, that makes it feel like it's a bad or a painful experience. And that's the part that we actually have control over, that we don't have to perceive it like that. And I think forgiveness helps us to transform the perception from one of fear to one of love. It sounds like you wanted to say something else.
Not only changing the perception, but also changing
Dream.
the reality around us.
Yes, because what happens when you practice forgiveness, what the Course in Miracles, what happens when you practice the Course in Miracles version of forgiveness, and you probably already know this, is that one of two things happens. Either your perception of the situation changes so that your projection of the situation changes, right? Because perception makes projection. So we're projecting the situations in our lives in the dream based on our perception. So if we change our perception from fear to love, the actual situation in the dream often turns out to be different, just changes. It happens to me all the time. The other thing that can happen is the situation may not change in the dream, but our feeling about it and the charge we have on it and the reaction we have about it, or the meaning we're making of it, changes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You gave you gave a talk on this yesterday, talking about collapsing time,
I did.
and you clip out all kinds of experiences
Yeah, we
that
do.
don't need to happen.
Right.
When forgiveness is established,
Yeah.
a whole
Yeah, those punishments.
yes.
Those punishments that we set up, that's the last thing I want to say, because I think it's really important, is that we have all these punishments that our ego mind has put into place, right? These things that we have to go through that are painful, that are going to wind up being forgiveness opportunities. But the Course in Miracles teaches us that the more that we practice forgiveness, those are collapsed, not in linear time, but in experiential time. They are collapsed, and we can just, it's like it picks us up and moves us along the continuum and puts us back down here, and we get to skip over all of these crappy things that were scheduled to
Nice.
happen. So,
Nice,
it's a happy
that's
dream.
awesome.
All right.
Well, we've run
Thank
out
you
of
so
time.
much,
If everyone
everybody.
would please rise, and we'll join together, and we'll say goodbye for this talk. That was awesome. Thank you,
you.
Kelly.
Thank you,
Everyone
Val.
give Kelly a warm welcome.
Thanks,
for that.
Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
being
you,
here.
love
Thank you, live
streamers.
streamers, love streamers.
Love streamers.
And
Love streamers. Come on up and close the circle. And we're encompassing you in the circle, Treese, even though you're back there. We're encompassing all you live streamers in the circle.
all right.
And all the folks that are with Lisa today.
Everybody that's with Lisa down in New York and all of that. And I just want to remind everybody, thank you so much for participating, and that we love having you here. We love having you participate in our programs and being present here, and that this organization is largely driven by donation, and our space here is something that we do lovingly pay for. So there is a donation box in the back room there in the bookstore, and there's also a button online, and we certainly do appreciate your donations and gifts and tithes. Thank you so much. And so we want to say the prayer of tithes and offerings. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Amen. And just want to extend my appreciation first to Spirit for inspiring us all to be here today, whether it's in the body or online or in spirit, and joining us all together in our hearts and minds and allowing us to see the reflection of love and light of the world that is in one another, and therefore being able to see it within ourselves. And so it is.
So it is.
Thank you.
All right.
See you next week. Mwah. Thanks.